So I just wanted to let you know that that will be on. Please put your questions in the chat room. And then Cindy Talbot, who's going to be my co-host for the event, will kind of monitor it, and every once in a while, I'll stop and take some questions. We'll also have a break about halfway through. So let's go ahead and hopefully I can share my screen and we'll get started. Come on, there we go. All right, can everyone see the screen? If you can't, please put that in chat, but I think we'll be all set. Here's the agenda for today. It's pretty aggressive, and we'd like to cover the SBIR Small Business Innovation Research Small Business Technology Transfer Program first, because I'm going to assume that not everyone is familiar with the program in general. And then we'll drill down to the USDA SBIR program directly. All right, so, you know, everyone always wants to know what's in it for me. And this is where I like to start. So WIFM, or what's in it for me, starts with the Maine snapshot.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Karen, but your slides don't seem to be advancing. You're still on the intro opening slide, title slide.
How strange, because it is over here, huh?
Do you have two screens? Are you sharing the wrong screen?
I should be sharing the, yeah, well, I might be. Let me pause and stop. I do have two screens going on, but let's try that again. Let's try this one. Does it say snapshot?
No, it's showing,
yes.
It's showing your view though.
Oh, no.
Not the full view, not like the.
Oh, no. Okay, so let me try that again. I wonder what's going on here. Let me try this. Always using someone else's computer is never a good thing. Let's try that one. All right, now what are you saying?
We see the title slide again.
Just the title slide, not my view of it.
No, we see the full PowerPoint opening view.
Okay.
So if you hit the play slideshow, I think.
All right, resume slideshow. Let's see what happens. How is that? Are you seeing the agenda?
I am, but or we are, but we still see the full, like the other person said, the full PowerPoint screen. Yeah, try that one. Let's see if it goes full screen.
Oh, okay, so I may, let me see what's going on here. Bear with me and I'll stop sharing for a second. I thought I had this all sorted out, but obviously I don't.
It's the name of the game.
Of course, it's technology.
There we go.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, all right, that's what happens when you have too many screens open. All right, so we are now on the snapshot. Okay, so if everyone can see that, obviously we always want to know, as I said, what's in it for me. And within the state of Maine, this is the history since the inception of the SBIR STTR program in, I think it was 1982. 136 companies, 500 awards, $126 million. Now, specifically within the USDA program, it is one of the smaller SBIR programs. 63 companies have won awards worth $9.78 million. So we'll be talking about this later, but MTI does have a strong SBIR support program, and people that, companies that come in and use the SBIR Technical Assistance Program, TAP, program assistance, they tend to have a higher success rate than going it alone and trying to do it yourself, because it is a daunting program, and that is probably the best way I would say that. All right, so are we stuck, or are we seeing the overview? So I'm not sure what's going on.
I think we're still on the snapshot slide. I mean, we are still on the snapshot.
Okay, see, something is really going wonky here, because it's supposed to be advancing and it's not. So
Maybe just go back to the PowerPoint, you know.
yeah, actually,
It doesn't matter. We'll
I
just,
think I might, excuse me, let me just stop for a quick second.
I happen to know that Karen, she's nervous about the Wi-Fi where she lives at her home office when she does these. So she goes to the MTI office, but that, like she said, she's using it on someone else's computer. And if that were me, I would also be, you know, flummoxed. Is that the right word? See if that advances, Karen.
I will. Okay, so let me try this.
Yay.
Yay.
There we
Yeah.
go. Okay, so, all right. Let's try this again. Hey, never a dull moment when you get to do these webinars. You can tell. It's not something I do often, but I do it enough that I'm dangerous, I guess would be the best way to say it. So let's look at the SBIR STTR overview of the general program. And now, first of all, let me start by saying the SBIR Small Business Innovation Research Small Business Technology Transfer Program is overseen by the Small Business Administration, because it is a set-aside program for small businesses. And its purpose is multifold, as you can see by all of these bullets. I'm not going to read them all, but basically, Roland Tibbetts, who started the SBIR program first at the National Science Foundation, determined that small businesses needed to play a role in meeting federal R&D needs, and they needed to not compete with nonprofit research institutions and large businesses. The whole goal is to transform applied technology, take it out of the lab or out of the garage and put it into the commercial marketplace. So it is the commercialization of products, processes, and services. Also, there's now been an increased emphasis on encouraging and fostering participation by socially and economically disadvantaged persons. So the program is currently authorized through 2022 for agencies with large extramural research and development activities. Extramural means simply outside of the government. The federal government doesn't make anything. They always buy everything they need. And so this program is based on an agency's federal budget. So the set-asides for the SBIR program is 3.2% of an agency's extramural R&D budget. And the STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer, is 0.45, almost 0.5%. So between the two, we're looking at roughly $4.1 billion set aside for small businesses every year. So you want to, if you want to play, this is a good pool to be playing in. And every year there's over 7,000 awards being made to small businesses. So what does the program look like? It's a gated program, which means you have to go through phase 1 to get to phase 2, and then phase 3, while they call it a 3-phase program, there is no commercialization. I'm sorry, no SBIR funding. So you've got to keep that in mind, that by the time you get done with phase 2, you need to be able to have extra what do I want to say, commercial funding available to get your product over that valley of death, if you will, from prototype to actual sales of your product, process, or service. So every agency, and we'll talk about the agencies in a minute, are a little bit different. And one of the ways they differ is in their dollar amounts. Okay, phase 1 is feasibility. Will my idea work? And some agencies will have the time between 6 months and 1 year to do your period of performance, and $256,000. Phase 2, in most of the agencies, you have to go through phase 1 to get to phase 2 is prototype development. You've got 24 months to build your prototype and test it, hopefully in the marketplace, even with a few beta testers. And that can be upwards of $1.7 million. Now, what's important to know here, and I say up to 1.7 million, because these agencies all vary in size, not all agencies are going to have these large dollar amounts. So what's the process look like? You find your solicitation, you find your agency, and basically each agency issues a solicitation 1 or more times a year with topics of interest in it. So what we have to do is try to match your technology to their topic of interest. So every agency has a not only a budget, but a focus. So what they're going to do is issue these solicitations with topics that help meet their program or their agency goals. So some agencies have very broad awards, some agencies have very specific awards, and we can talk about that later. But overall, what you have to do is find that match. If they're very broad, it's pretty simple. But first, you find the solicitation, and we can help you do that. And there is a federal website that we can talk about later as well. You then take 140 to 160 hours to write your phase 1 award, or excuse me, your phase 1 proposal. You put it all together, and it can be up to 100 pages sometimes by the time you put everything together. It gets submitted, it gets evaluated by most likely a peer review process. But again, that depends on the agency. And then finally, you get your award. So like the federal government in everything else you're probably aware of, it is a slow process. It is not quick. So if you are thinking that you're going to get rich fast with federal SBIR TTR funding, that's normally not going to happen. All right, come on, let's go to the next slide. Is it going to work now? Oh, come on, seriously? There we go. Okay. So the agencies that participate in the SBIR's TTR program are all listed here. Now, the difference between the two programs, SBIR and STTR, is, and there's another slide that you'll see in a minute, is that with an STTR, you must partner with a nonprofit research institution. All right, in an SBIR, you don't have to, but it's highly encouraged. So that's something that you want to keep in mind as you move forward. Those agencies in red have both SBIR and STTR programs. Those agencies in blue, including the USDA on the far left, only have the SBIR program. So when we start talking about specifics with USDA, we're only going to be talking about the SBIR program and not the STTR program. There we go. Here are the program differences between the two. Again, the partnering, remember I said that STTR requires you to partner with a nonprofit research institution, but the SBIR encourages it. It is not required. With the principal investigator or the PI, the primary employment must be with the small business at time of award. And primary employment basically means that the PI must be an employee and cannot be employed full-time elsewhere. It would have to be less than half-time, less than 20 hours a week that you would need to be employed by your small business. Now with the STTR, the principal investigator may be employed by either the research institution partner or small business. In many cases, you're going to end up with two PIs, a PI of the small business and the PI sitting at the research institution. Keep in mind that the awards, whether it's an SBIR or an STTR, are always made to the small business. So your research institution partner will be a subcontractor to your business. So depending on the budget and the maximum amount allowed by the agency, companies may subcontract out up to 33% in a phase 1 and 50% of a phase 2. And then in an STTR, the minimums are 40% of the work must be done by the small business, with 30% being accomplished by the research institution. And the final 30% can be divvied up as needed. The small business can do it all. It can all go to the research institution, or there can be other subcontractors and consultants. So a lot of people say, well, 33%, what does that include? If you're looking at let's just say $200,000, you can subcontract out 33%, right? That's like $66,000. That normally only is only applicable for subcontractors and consultants. Materials, supplies, travel, indirect fees, profit can all be included in your half of that 67% that a small business must do. One of the biggest benefits within the SBIR STTR program is IP, intellectual property ownership. It is the only federal program that permits all IP rights to remain with the small business. It's a very important distinction that the SBIR program has, and within the data rights, depending on the agencies, whether it's a contracting agency or a granting agency, you may have to declare up front what rights the small business will give the government with certain property, certain IP being developed during the program. One of the biggest benefits with IP ownership is once you complete your job, the federal government cannot disclose your technology for a minimum of 4 years. Some of the agencies are higher than that, but that's the minimum. So the government gets a non-exclusive right to use your technology, but they cannot disclose it. All right. The biggest thing with the IP, because I know this will be a question, is, the federal government gets march-in rights, which means if the government determines that your technology is so important to national defense and you either go out of business or you elect not to commercialize it, the government has march-in rights that they could come in, take your technology and award it to someone else to bring it to market or to their needs. I've never seen it happen, and I've been in this business for well over 20 years. So it's not something that you really need to worry about. Within the STTR program, the small business has to negotiate allocation of rights with the research partner. Keep that in mind, that's very important. Some of the agencies require a sample document be developed that says who's going to own what as the work is being developed. And in many cases, this can be a sticking point with research institutions because research institutions find their value in many cases through patents and IP. So it's very important to understand the allocation of rights between you and your research institution partner. I have seen some cases where STTR awards and even SBIR awards have not been awarded because the small business and the research institution could not come to an agreement on IP rights. So you really want to get that understood up front. Now, this is a quirk, well, I shouldn't say a quirk, but a tweak within the program is about majority venture capital ownership. That is something that was added a few years ago. Not all agencies have adopted it, but some of the agencies like the National Institutes of Health do allow majority VC ownership in the SBIR program, but that is not permitted within the STTR program. USDA does not recognize majority VC ownership. So the small business applicant has to be owned or controlled by a person, a small business, or another small business. So one of the things I just realized that's not in here is what is the size of a small business? Well, the SBA defines a small business as being up to 500 employees. So that's a really large small business. So most of the time your small business should be applicable and eligible to play within the SBIR program and the STTR program. On average, the number of employees by a company participating in the SBIR program is 2 to 10 employees. So they're not surprised by your company being very small, even 1 to 2 persons, people in a phase 1. Participating agencies, as you saw in the previous slide, there are 11 agencies participating in the SBIR program, and 5 of those agencies participate in the STTR program. So this slide is not very clear, but it gives you an idea of the budget by agency. The first one in blue is the Department of Defense. Of that $4 billion budget, the Department of Defense has $1.97 billion. That's followed by Health and Human Services, which is the National Institutes of Health, Department of Energy, and the National Science Foundation. And then NASA. NASA has a budget of $219 million. So those top 5 agencies, again, have both SBIR and STTR programs. Agencies with simply just the SBIR program, you've got the USDA, Homeland Security, Department of Commerce, and within the Department of Commerce, there are 2 departments, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology and the NOAA administration, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, followed by the Department of Transportation, Department of Education, and the EPA. So the red and blue in this slide shows that the agencies in red issue grants and the agencies in blue issue contracts. What's the difference between the 2? It's very subtle. Contracts are exactly that. You enter into a contract with the Department of Homeland Security. They're going to expect deliverables, possibly a prototype in a phase 2. You're going to be required to do, I believe some of them require monthly reports or quarterly reports, but there's no payback if you don't perform or if you can't prove feasibility in a phase 1, whether it's a contract or a grant. With a grant, it is truly a grant. You are supposed to submit interim and final reports, and all of the agencies tend to hold back 5 or 10% of the value of your award until you submit your final report. Again, it's a very subtle distinction, but it's one that you should be aware of if you get the award. All right, award mechanisms. Again, here is the discussion between contracting and granting agencies, more flexibility. One of the good things that we're starting to see across the board is that these agencies realize that you guys are not sitting on a pile of money just waiting to do $200,000 or $256,000 worth of work. So many of the agencies allow you to draw down the money either in advance. I think some of the agencies allow you to draw it all except for like the final 10% upfront. Some of them will require you to draw down on a monthly and then pay within 2 or 3 days. These are the nuances between the contracting and granting agencies. USDA is a granting agency. All right, so the small business participating must be a for-profit. You cannot be a nonprofit organization. So you have to be, number one, a small business under 500 employees, US owned and operated, and be a organized for-profit. All right, 92%, that's the number I mentioned. They're now putting a statistic to the comment I made earlier that 10 or few people are employed by the small business. The success rate on average across all 11 federal agencies runs about 14 to 17%. And within the USDA, the success rate in FY20 was 16%, and they had received 435 applications. Because it's a gated program, and except for, I think, 2 agencies, you have to go through phase 1 feasibility to get to phase 2 prototype development. They have a 40 to 50% success rate across the board because you're only competing against other phase 1 applicants. So in the USDA, they did have a 40 to 50%. I can't remember what the exact number of exact percentage was, but it was between 40 and 50%, and they only had 68 applicants. So even though they had 435 applications for phase 1, obviously not all of them go through phase 2. And you have up to a year to submit a phase 2 application. Now, one of the beautiful things about this program, and it's probably on another slide, so I'm going to be talking about this later, is that, now I've lost my train of thought. With this program at 40 to 50%, you really are doing a great job, right? You're going to be showing how you're going to take your technology and move it into commercialization. And so you have to begin with the end in mind with this program. And what does that mean? That simply means when you're writing your phase 1 application, you need to be pretty sure, at least, at that point in time, where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years, right? You need to know who your customer is, what's your marketplace, what's the size of the market. So you have to begin with with the end in mind, which is your vision of commercialization. And then you back into prototype development and then feasibility, which is your phase 1. Let's see, so we saw just a couple of quick questions here. Can an MTI match from SBIR carry into phase 3? Yes. So we'll get into this in a little more detail later on, but the SBIR program to the Maine Technology Institute's program is considered basically the same as cash when it comes to match. And if you get a phase 1 and when you get your phase 2, as we always like to say, we can work with you and MTI to come up with some bridging money to bridge the gap between phase 1 and phase 2. And once you get a phase 2, the first $100,000 of MTI are considered a grant. And so it can be used for any matching program that the agency may have. For example, the National Science Foundation has a phase 2B program, which matches every dollar brought in outside of federal money, 50 cents on the dollar. So again, these are like nuances, if you will, that every agency has. And You're not going to be expected to understand it completely, but that's why you've got me and the TAP team, if you will. So yes, the SBIR program and MTI are great programs that are very complementary. Let's see, another quick question. Are businesses with 10 or less favored, or do they just apply more frequently? They just really apply more frequently. Because that is, for many cases, for the small business, the only opportunity, or the only opportunity for funding besides friends, families, and fools. You're certainly way too early in your technology development for VC, angel, or even bank funding. So this is very, very early stage. And when you're very early stage, you tend to have very few employees. So it's not favored, it's just a statistic. And then finally, and I'm just going to move on really quickly after this one, are all of these statistics for all of the US. Well, the 90%, 92% of phase one awardees is a all across the board statistic, but the 16% is specifically USDA with the phase one awards. However, I did say that on average across all 11 agencies, the success rate in a phase one is anywhere between 14 and 17%. Sometimes higher, sometimes lower, but that's the average. And then 40 to 50% is the average across all agencies for phase two. All right, moving on. So we talked a little bit about the principal investigator. That person has to be knowledgeable of the technology, but they do not have to have a PhD or an MD. All right, so keep that in mind. You just need to have that technology background. When an agency is reviewing and evaluating the applications, they look at the credibility of the team. That is one of the criteria for evaluation. So if you don't have the PhD or MD, it's really, really important for you to develop a strong, credible team. And we'll talk about that later, but keep that in mind that you may get an award of a phase one feasibility effort if it's just, and I just use that in quotes, just you. But by the time you get into phase two, they expect to see one or more employees and a strong team with a design of how you're going to build your business. All right, very, very important because these agencies don't know you, they don't know your qualifications. So it's up to you to perform to your highest capability. And the only way you can do that is by having a strong team. All right, we talked about that SBIR program having 11 agencies and the STTR program that it's gated. You know, the SBA has set up all of the parameters and the guidelines for how the SBIR STTR program will operate, but every agency is permitted to add their own exceptions and caveats. USDA is one of the smaller agencies and they tend to follow the general rules quite closely. But when you get to the larger agencies, specifically the National Institutes of Health, they used to be called the Gumby of the SBIR STTR program because they truly took the SBA guidelines and requirements and said those are only guidelines and they can do pretty much whatever they want. And they still do have quite a few exceptions. They routinely exceed the phase one, phase two dollar limits that I talked about earlier. But they also have a very high level of review and they are truly all about the science. When we talked about these agencies and their areas of focus and their mission needs, contracting agencies, which is something that you need to keep in mind, have a mission. And with these contracting agencies, most of them may be your customer, specifically the Department of Defense. So the department within the DoD has a problem and they need it solved. And so they're looking to the SBIR program, to your company, to solve that problem and eventually buy those products once it can get inserted into a program of record. All right, so most of the contracting agencies will become your customer, and DoD is the largest. They also have very narrow topics. They're going to be telling you what a phase 1 looks like and what a phase 2 looks like. Now, the other agencies like USDA, National Science Foundation, have these very broad topics. It's called Investigator Initiated. And within that NSF type program and USDA, they'll give you general broad topics, and then it's up to you to fit your technology into their topic areas. All right, so keep that in mind, because these granting agencies like NSF and USDA, they will not be your customer. So it's up to you to develop your customer base. So a lot of times companies will say, well, I just want to submit a proposal, you know, and I don't want to do that work to look at the solicitation and try to figure out if there's a match between their topics of interest and my technology. I just want to submit a proposal. That's called an unsolicited proposal, and it will be automatically rejected if there is no fit. So you've got to keep that in mind. You've got to match up your technology with that agency's topics of interest. We'll be talking about USDA specifically, but within the National Science Foundation, I think they have now broadened their topic areas to about 15 or 18. And almost every single one, and within NSF, I'm sorry, they have a topic called Other. So if it doesn't fit, you can submit under the topic called Other. Now, the twitch, if you will, with NSF is that you have to do a project pitch first and be invited to submit a full proposal. All right. So also keep in mind too that the SBIR TTR program is not a cost competition. It is a technically competitive proposal process. So you don't get any bonus points for if the phase 1 limits $256,000 or $100,000 for submitting a budget that's under those amounts, because they're looking at the science. They're not looking at the dollars. That is a secondary evaluation criteria. All right. Any questions here? How are we looking on time? And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
I don't see anything in the chat right now. There was one asking about whether the statistics of awards and so forth you presented were for all of the United States, and I answered that in the chat.
Great.
My only comment on the budget, and I'm sure you would agree with this, is that well, it's not a cost competitive process. Almost every time reviewers' comments, I have seen them assess whether the level of effort and what you're proposing in your scope of work is in line with your budget. They don't like to see you over propose for the budget, because then they just know you're not going to be able to do it. And similarly, they want to make sure that, you know, you're proposing enough work that is, actually costs the amount of the budget. So.
Exactly. So the word I like to use is congruent. You've got to have a very reasonable scope of work and a very reasonable budget, and they have to match. You know, you can't propose 3 years of work for $256,000. It just doesn't work that way. So you've got to have a realistic budget. And when we have a government accountant that can help you with that, as well as myself. So we all tend to work together to ensure that your proposal is technically and administratively competitive.
Another comment came in directly to me, but I think it's probably, another question, I think it's probably worth saying to the group. So the question is, if some of the innovation is incorporated into new facility construction, would that part of the construction be eligible for SBIR? And I'll let you answer that, Karen.
Most likely not. The federal government does not fund infrastructure projects. And nor do they allow you to buy equipment that costs more than $5,000 in a phase one. Sometimes if you make the argument well in a phase two, they will allow you to buy equipment that costs over $5,000. But no, unless the innovation is very technically compelling, I would say no, it would not be fundable. But you know, if you're talking about a new smart heating system, possibly the heating system could be considered technically innovative and therefore be fundable. Go Labs a few years ago, if any of you have heard of them, got funding for their innovative insulation under their Passive House program. So I guess I would have to say, when you say into new facility building, it depends, right? It depends on what you're looking to fund, get funded, I should say. Remember, this is not just funding because you need the money to get the product into the marketplace. This is a research and development program. So you have an innovation that probably, just by virtue of the word, doesn't exist right now. So what happens is you're proving the feasibility of your idea, of your hypothesis, that X will equal Y. And so your phase one is feasibility. You know, you're doing some benchtop work, you're doing some discovery work, and you're setting forth objectives to prove your feasibility, that my idea, that your idea will work as you presume it will. And so that's what this program is all about. It's, you know, these agencies have different levels of definition of innovation. For the National Institutes of Health, they are totally science-based and not so much on commercialization in a phase one. NSF is at the extreme opposite of that. They consider commercialization more important in most cases than the technology. In the review criteria, it's 50-50. So you need to know who your customer is and is going to be, how you're going to enter the market, and how many, you know, in projections, how much are you going to sell? You know, is there a real market out there? And that's a very different view of innovation, because NSF, when you look at their website, they'll tell you they want something that is disruptive and paradigm shifting. So what's ironic about that is sometimes when you submit proposals that are really innovative and paradigm shifting, you know, you get a reviewer that'll say, that's not going to work, or, you know, that's really out there. But it happens. And so you just have to retool and rewrite your proposal. And that's one thing I didn't tell you. In a phase one, it's not surprising that your first application will be declined. But what's good is that you will receive the reviewer comments in full, in which you can then evaluate and of course consider the reviewers as all being nuts or not qualified to be a reviewer. But once you calm down, you read them and you see the merits of their comments, you can then rewrite, retool your application and resubmit one time. With NIH, you can resubmit a phase one twice. Now, if you get to phase two, you only have one shot. You cannot submit a declined phase two proposal twice.
Karen, I was just going to say, in terms of the construction question, certainly funding is allowed to go towards construction or, you know, production of prototypes. So that, you know, if you can couch it like that, it could possibly float depending on the agency.
Exactly, you know, and that's the thing. You always hear me say it depends, because it's not, while the program is one overall, as I mentioned earlier, each agency has its nuances. So let's dive into the USDA SBIR program first. And then we can talk about, you know, some of the how do you actually write the proposal, which I think is very important. And we can talk about commercialization, because every agency does treat commercialization separately. All right, USDA, United States Department of Agriculture. The SBIR program is overseen by a department within USDA called the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And its purpose and goal and mission is to advance knowledge for agriculture, the environment, human health, well-being, and communities. So one of the things to bear in mind with the USDA, if you remember, I just said that NSF is way up here with the innovation, and they want this paradigm shifting, disruptive technology that's never been done before. And NSF is all about commercialization, as I said, all about commercialization. USDA kind of falls in the middle of the group of the 11 agencies. They're interested in definitely the science, far more, in my opinion, than commercialization. But it is also something that over the years, I've seen USDA become more focused on commercialization. Used to be there was a paragraph about commercialization. Now they actually have a section that they want you to talk about the market, your competition, and how you're going to bring this product to market. So a couple of these pictures that you see on this slide are a couple of awardees. The first is the Maine Blizzard Cloudfish from Sea and Reef Aquaculture. And the second company here is Maine Medicinals. Maine Medicinals is a woman-owned small business that has received, I believe, 4 awards from the USDA, 2 phase 1s, 2 phase 2s, and has taken that technology developed with USDA funding and, and is now working on a phase 2 from the Department of Defense. So this company is actually moving things along. They've got products in the marketplace, but they are still continuing doing research. So those are 2 good examples of companies. All right, here's the webpage for the USDA SBIR program. If you want to just Google it, you need to include the words SBIR. Okay, so USDA SBIR will get you here. That's something that you need to keep in mind, because if you try just go to the USDA webpage and look for funding opportunities, you're going to get lost. So USDA SBIR, and that really applies across the board. You know, you can do NSF, SBIR, Department of Energy, SBIR, or STTR. All right, so here's their homepage. And one of the things, there's 2 or 3, I guess, buttons, if you will, on the left that I want to talk about. The second one down is the phase 1, phase 2 solicitation. So that's where you're going to click on that. And you're going to be able to download the phase 1 solicitation that is currently open with proposals due November 3rd. Right? Eligibility requirements, we've kind of talked about. The grantee resources are where you're going to find forms and some other guidance that goes along with what's called an RFA, request for applications. You'll hear that term, and solicitation being used interchangeably. But what I want to draw your attention to here, and I'll be talking about this more later, is abstracts of funded SBIR projects. All of these agencies publish the non-confidential abstracts of awards that have been made. And within these abstracts, you get an idea of what companies have been funded and the technology that's being proposed. It's really important that you look at these abstracts and you'll see what they funded, because USDA knows what they funded in the past. And if you don't, and you propose literally the same thing, they're going to say, well, you didn't do your due diligence, you didn't see what we've already funded, and you'll be just basically discounted right from the start. Here are the USDA topics of interest. We're finally getting to the meat of the whole webinar: forestry, plant production, animal production, conservation of natural resources, food science, nutrition, rural and community development, aquaculture, biofuels, small and mid-sized farms, and then plant production engineering. So all of these phase 1 awards are $175,000, except for topics 8.6 and 8.12, which are $125,000. Again, phase 1 feasibility. Excuse me. Why are 8.6 and 8.12 less dollars available for a phase 1 award? All of the other topic areas are expecting new innovative technology development. All right, 8.6 and 8.12 basically say you can take existing products, processes, and services and tweak them and fit them to meet these topic areas. It's a big difference. It says that telemedicine is a great one for rural and community development. Telemedicine exists, but if you come up with a new way to apply it in rural communities, then it might be a good fit within 8.6. Small and mid-sized farms, same thing. If you want to develop a marketing program for seaweed or value-added products, okay, the products may already exist. So what you're doing is developing that marketing program. All right, so each one of these agencies, or excuse me, each one of these topics have subtopics underneath it, and you'll be able to see where your technology might fit within that program. Now, because USDA is a granting agency and they're not going to be your customer, the program, what do they call them? National Program Leaders, or NPLs, I call them program managers, are available to talk with you at any time about the fit of your technology to their topic area. And if you're not sure where it fits, they'll be able to help guide you as to say, yes, it fits in aquaculture, or maybe it fits in small and mid-sized farms. And when you're working with land-based aquaculture, it can fit in either 8.7 or 8.12. 8.12, because USDA considers land-based aquaculture facilities or farms, if you businesses as farms. So it could fit under one or the other, but the NPL will be able to tell you that. So what does USDA fund within these 12 topic areas? Here's the technology, and it literally runs the whole gamut of technologies: food safety, materials and coatings, nanotechnology, remote learning, acoustic work, engineering. So one of the key things about the program in general, and something if you've ever attended any of my other workshops or webinars, I'll tell you, never judge an agency by its name, because all agencies fund biotech, all right? The agency with the largest medical funding budget is Department of Defense. It's not the NIH, all right? National Science Foundation will fund food safety. They'll fund biofuels. So normally we can fit your technology into one or more agencies. And you can submit your proposal to more than one agency suitably modified. You just need to disclose it. All right, here's the specifics within USDA rural and community development. Now, what's key within this topic, because a lot of companies want to go after this because they think, well, I just want to take this and move it into the rural community. Well, that's fine, but you have to include an objective of assessing the impact on your technology into the rural community, all right, or the socioeconomic development opportunities being granted, all right, significant benefit to rural America. So when you're talking about assessing impact, you probably need a research institution as a partner or a subcontractor to help you assess that impact. So you've got to be able to develop a technology and then show how it's going to impact that rural community, because USDA is really focused on rural and community development. And you need to have, we'll talk about letters of support later, but you need to have a community in mind who is willing to be your test case, if you will, and to work with you to shape how you're going to develop your technology and your product, processor, or service. And small and mid-sized farms, again, supporting small farms because they're critical to sustaining and strengthening the leadership and social fabric of rural communities, all right? We want to make sure that people in rural areas get the same access to technology and opportunities as those in urban areas. And you can see the subtopic areas over the right. So one of the questions was, does it support green technology? Yes, it does. You know, turbines were a big one years ago. If you have new methods of creating biofuels or reducing the cost of farm operations, absolutely, they'll be very interested in that. Okay. Here are the specifics. As I mentioned, their phase 1 period of performance is 8 months, $125,000 or $175,000, depending on the topic area. Phase 2, what's interesting is they don't mention a dollar value in their phase 2 grants, but you have 2 years to do prototype development. And as of last year, it's $600,000 for those 2 years of work. But they've kind of given some indication that depending on the budget, that phase 2 dollar amount might be going up. One of the things I did want to tell you within the phase 1 RFA, which Cindy put the link in the chat box to, all of these different topic areas tell you how many awards they estimate they will make by topic, and that is new. So you might see 6 awards, 8 awards, or 10 awards. But sometimes if a topic manager does not have enough qualified companies or applications to make an award, they will shift the award amount. Also, too, please note that the phase 1 RFA is applicable for 2 federal fiscal years. So it's good for FY 2022 and FY 2023. A lot of times companies will think they can get the work done in 8 months. They find out they can't. And so you can get a 12-month no-cost extension to carry on the work. But you know, you got to marry that with the fact that in a phase 1, you're either talking about $125,000 or $175,000. You don't want to run out of money. So you really want to manage your money responsibly so that you can complete your effort within the 8 months and $125,000 or $175,000, because that's, you want to get to phase 2. That's where the money's at. So you want to do it in 8 months, and then you want to write your phase 2 proposal and get it submitted as soon as possible. And I think we've already talked about the other bullets on this page. Okay, due date November 3rd. Right now, writing a proposal can be done for submission by November 3rd. It's going to be tough, and it's going to have to be your sole focus for the next 30 to 45 days. Know too, though, that the topics don't change much from year to year. And that's really important, because if you just decide that you haven't pulled your team together, or you want to think about it some more, or you're too busy, you can do it over the winter. You can, because the proposal topics don't change from year to year. So you can start writing and with the plan of submitting next year, which would be either in October or November. So as I had mentioned earlier, it is a slow process. The review panels meet in January and February. The award decisions made March and April, and the research effort will go July 2022 to February 2023. Now, you submit or you finish your phase 2 in February, your phase 1 in February 2023, and they're going to release the phase 2 solicitation in December with a deadline of March. So you're, you know, when you're wrapping up your phase 1, you're writing your phase 1 final report and drafting your phase 2 proposal, because you want to submit that March. And then again, 4 to 6 month review process and a 2-year period of performance. So it's a slow process, but it is a grant. It is not a loan. There is no payback. If you don't prove feasibility in phase 1, again, no payback. You just don't submit a phase 2. You get to keep all IP and these agencies do not take equity in your company. So it's early stage, accessible money that'll fund you when no one else will. And that's the beauty of the SBIR program and the STTR program.
Hey,
And
Karen,
just, yeah.
sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. There was a question earlier about whether USDA has a commercialization phase.
Yes and no. And we're going to get into the weeds here for a second.
Okay.
The SBA promised rolled out a program called TABA, Technical and Business Assistance, and it's basically business assistance. So within all of these different agencies, you can put in money or use an agency's commercialization vendor to help you commercialize or develop your commercialization strategy. So these numbers within USDA specifically will allow you to do not include the TABA funding. Now, TABA uses one of the, I think, top 3 commercialization vendors. It's either Dawnbreaker or Larda. I'm thinking it's Dawnbreaker. And so if you want to use Dawnbreaker or their commercialization vendor for commercialization assistance in phase 1, you'll ask for an award of $175,000 or $125,000. If you want to use your own commercialization vendor in a phase 1, then you can add, I think it's $5,600 to the phase 1 base amount of $125,000 or $175,000 to hire your commercialization vendor. But that company has to be vetted by the agency and the scope of work approved. So there's commercialization support both in phase 1, excuse me, in phase 1 and phase 2. But there are opportunities that are larger with the other agencies for commercialization, such as National Science Foundation and Department of Energy and NIH. They all have very robust follow-on commercialization opportunities. So it depends on the agency. And that's why you've got to download the solicitation, read it, get familiar with it, got to peruse the websites, and sign up for their listservs, because they also do a lot of workshops and webinars. So we're still got quite a bit of information to cover in the next 20-25 minutes. So I'm going to kind of blast through that because I'd like to be able to take some Q&A at the end. But here's the benefits in reality of the SBIR program. So I think we've talked about all of them. Don't bore the reviewers. They're doing it nights and weekends for a very small stipend, in some cases as small as $250. And so they're reviewing them when they're not doing their regular job. And you want to make a proposal that is easy to read, provides a compelling argument, is innovative, has a solution that the market really wants. You don't want a technology in search of a market. You want to have market pull rather than market push. Okay, strong letters of support, again, are really, really important. So in phase 1, you've got to be talking to, even before you submit your phase 1 proposal, you've got to be talking to potential customers, right? There's something called a non-disclosure agreement that you can sign if you really want to get into the weeds about that. But basically, you want them to be your champion and be saying, yeah, I will buy your product if it really works, because it's going to solve one of my pain points. Okay, so we've been kind of answering some questions. Do we have, I saw a question earlier about proprietary information. You may submit proprietary information in a proposal. It is highly discouraged because it has to be treated differently from regular proposals. Now, all of the reviewers have to sign non-disclosure agreements and conflict of interest statements before they can review proposals, right? So that eliminates one of the biggest areas of concern. I believe even USDA is now saying in the RFA that if you want to submit proprietary information and you want to mark it or disclose it as being proprietary, you have to not even include it on the page. You have to provide a separate page that shows that it is proprietary. It used to be you could mark it on the side with, you know, a change bar or asterisks or something like that. But now they're saying it has to be on a separate page. That really creates a problem for USDA or any agency for the review process. You know, it requires you to take a disclosure that you're giving and put it on a separate page. So now the reviewer is going, where's this information? They're trying to find it and they're going, why is this proprietary? Having been in this program for, you know, almost 30 years now, I have never seen or heard of any questions of inappropriate contact or disclosure by a federal agency or a reviewer. You know, the reviewer would never do it because it just ruins their credibility, and they'll never, you know, be able to review proposals or work with an agency again. So having said that, you do have to put proprietary information in a proposal. You have to just, you can talk about the secret sauce. You don't have to talk about the ingredients that go into the secret sauce. You've got to give the reviewers enough to review. And if you aren't disclosing some proprietary information, they're going to have nothing to review. And trust me, doesn't work in these proposals. And because these proposals are proprietary to each company, no, I don't have any sample proposals to give you as an example. If you're in the biotech world, there are some on the NIH's website, SBIR website. Actually, it's on one of the institute's website, Allergy and Infectious Diseases. They actually have a very good training program for writing an SBIR. But all of the other agencies don't have sample proposals on their website. Now, yes, you can Google them, and you'll get, quite honestly, trash in most cases. Most of them are old. They're 20 years old or more. They're not in the right format. So it's very difficult to assess the quality of the proposals that are on the web, because no one wants to put their proprietary information out there. I will tell you that MTI's TAP program, of which I am the lead consultant, you know, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of companies over the past almost 22 years. So a lot of times, I would say you've got to trust us in the process, because we've been doing it for a long, long time. All right, so let's just move on to elements of a proposal, and we'll just cover this very quickly. So there is one document that has to be non-confidential, and that is your summary abstract. So that's kind of given them at a very high level what it is you want to develop, why it's important, what problem or opportunity you're solving or looking to go after. What's your work look like, your objectives, and what the outcomes are going to be. And then finally, the social impact. Now, new this year with the project narrative, it's not new that it's 17 pages. What's new is they have gone back to this 1.5 space lines for their proposal. So that is something that is going to impact, obviously, the number of pages and space that you have to write your project narrative, your scope of work, your impact statements. So you have to be very succinct, because it's not just let me tell you a story, it's you answering their required statements. You know, you have to answer everything that they're asking for. So here are the elements of the 17 pages. As I mentioned before, if you get declined and you go to resubmit, you can do a response. You get a 1-page response, right? You get to show how your technology matches up to their program priorities. In other words, their mission needs. Identification and significance of the problem and opportunity. How are you going to solve this? You know, what are you trying to do? In one case, I saw an application, it was not within Maine, the abstract of it, where a woman-owned business was designing women-friendly farm tools and implements. And it got funded because, you know, there's X number of companies, farms run by women or smaller people, if you will. And so they got an award to develop ergonomically friendly, women-friendly tools. Background and rationale, how'd you come up with it? And if you're coming up with a really new technology, you've got to find something in the literature that supports your hypothesis. All right, makes sense, because you've got to base your technology and your development on basic research. There's got to be something out there that says, yes, it might work. Relationship with research and development, that tells the reviewers what you would like to do in a phase 2. Again, think of this as the whole timeline between phase 1 and commercialization. So you've got to know, or have some idea at least, of what your phase 2 is going to look like, what it's going to do, and then what your product is going to be. The meat of the narrative is your technical objectives. Normally in a phase 1, you should have 1 to 3 objectives. How are you going to prove feasibility? What questions are you going to answer with your work plan? Those are your tasks. What work are you going to do? So you need to think of the objectives and work plan as being your blueprint for 8 months of work. Finally, I shouldn't say finally, but the next section is related research or research and development. What are the experts doing? What have you done in the past to prove, to at least do some of the preliminary research that shows that your idea should work? All right, and market opportunity. This is where you start talking about how you're going to create your product. What's the market? What's the economics? You know, will they buy it? What's your competition? Resources needed, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about the market in many cases. And now, if you'll note in that box below, you have to do a 10-page commercialization plan in phase 2. So the sooner you get started on developing your commercialization strategy, the better. Now, if you're interested, and my contact information will be on the last page, and you'll also have access to this recorded webinar. The MIT offers what's known as a SBIR program, and it's a 3-week program that is offered by MIT through the I-Core Innovation Core program, which allows you to start doing customer discovery. And customer discovery requires you to actually develop a business model based on Steve Blank's theory of lean startups, and then go interview some customers. And I highly recommend it for USDA or any SBIR opportunity. But also to know that if you decide you're going to go to the National Science Foundation, it's almost mandatory that you go through that. You'll get bonus points across any agency by doing this sort of customer discovery. Outside of those 17 ages, you're going to compile your bibliography, facilities, equipment. You're going to be talking about, if you're working with a research institution or consultants, you've got to get letters of commitment. You're going to do senior key personnel profiles, current and pending support to make sure they're not overcommitting themselves, either you, the small business, or the research institution. You can take G&A's general and administrative overhead funding, 10%, and you can take a profit of up to 7%. And you always, our government accountant, Stan Gavitt, will always ensure that you take the full 7% because it's not tied to any work plan or task that you want to do. So let's say you need to hire a marketing person or do patent work, which is not fundable, you can use your profit. So sub-award budgets and letters of support. Within those letters of support, they really, really want to see them. They want to see evidence that the market is interested in your product, process, or service. So start talking to your customers. Review an award process, science and technical feasibility, market potential, importance of the problem. And these are all spelled out in the RFA. So I really recommend that you take the RFA and print it out, read it, highlight it, and read it again. All right, we've talked about the review process. Both myself and Suzanne Hamlin, excuse me, have been reviewers for USDA and National Science Foundation, both phase 1 and phase 2. So we've been there and done that. So we know what they are looking for, and we can help guide the development of your proposal. Talk about some of the award requirements. You do have to keep time cards, and you have to allocate costs correctly. Stan will help you develop your, set up your books to be GAP approved, if you will, and in compliance with the federal acquisition regulation. Phase 1, phase 2 opportunities. So again, these are all spelled out in the RFAs. So how do you proceed? So one of the biggest stumbling blocks in getting into this program is getting registered. And I hate to say that. There are up to 5 registrations depending on the agency. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but know that if you do it yourself and you mess it up, it can take weeks or months to get it undone. So I highly recommend that you contact the maineptac.org, go to their website, contact a counselor in your area, and they will guide you through the process. I've talked about the time to spend. You'll need to spend to write a proposal. You need to pull your team together. And just have faith. You can do it. Now, whether or not you want to do it in 45 days or not, that is totally up to you, but I'm available to talk with you. We could set up a time to say, let's, so I can understand what your technology is, and then I can talk about fit and what you would need to do to get ready. I do provide a template for the proposal so that it's all set up and ready to go. Earlier, I talked about, if you remembered with the USDA, about the abstracts of funded projects. That's something you want to definitely do. You want to talk to your customers. The SBA's website, sbir.gov, is very good. You can do closed award searches based on keywords or companies to see what's been funded across any of the 11 federal agencies. They have tutorials. The SBIR.gov also has links to every agency's SBIR webpage. So that's important too. So at a minimum, look at the SBIR.gov website. You can also go to the Maine Technology Institute's website. Under what we fund, the last item is federal funding assistance, and you'll find information on the SBIR program. You'll find some presentations, information on the technical assistance consultants, and all sorts of good information about the SBIR program. Okay, we talked about the abstracts of prior awards. Besides the SBIR program, there is a program called CRIS, Current Research Information System, that you can search within USDA directly, and that will cover anything in your technology area that the USDA has funded. We've talked a lot about the grantsmanship. Here are some bullets that you need to keep in mind. I like to tell companies that writing the research, I call it the technical narrative, that's 17 pages. Think of it as a term paper on steroids, and it needs to be written at the level of what might be funded in Scientific American. So you've got to have citations. You need to be clear, concise, and do not submit a proposal that is 17 pages of straight text. No one reads the whole proposal like that. So you got to give them pictures, graphics, etc. Reviewers will read first and last paragraphs. So there's a lot of different ways that we can help you develop that strong proposal. Okay, this actually came from the Source's Mouth presentation from the USDA a couple of weeks ago. Here are the questions that the program leaders, topic managers, are looking for answers in your proposal. So keep that in mind. Okay, here's this business with registrations. If you're not a business already, you should register your business with the IRS and receive a taxpayer ID number. You have to, what used to be called a Dun & Bradstreet number. They're starting to phase out Dun & Bradstreet. So now it's called a unique entity identifier. You have to register with SAM, SBIR.gov, and then finally grants.gov, which is where your workspace is. Timeline for registrations has shortened immensely. It used to be over 30 days, but I think it's now down to a week to 10 days if there are no problems. And yes, the new UEI number should be your old Dun & Bradstreet number if you're already existing with Dun & Bradstreet. And like I said, it is still Dun & Bradstreet right now because it is a federal government dnb.com site. But eventually SAM is taking that over. So there'll be other, probably another method of applying for your UEI. Okay, I'm going to hold questions because unfortunately we're down to 7 minutes, and I do want to talk about the support program offered by the Maine Technology Institute, the financial support they offer, and then also let you know that MTI has other funding besides the SBIR program to help you develop your technology. All right, so the TAP program, Technical Assistance Program, MTI is mandated by its founding legislation to support SBIR's TTR program and help companies submit these important technology applications. So basically, if you look at this, there are 4 buckets, if you will, that we all fall into. I do the top 2 pretty well. I do everything but the government work or the accounting work, and guide you through the whole process. I would be with you from start until you hit the submit button. Proposal strategy, planning, editing, reviewing of proposals, commercialization strategy, development, basically the whole 9 yards. We have a government accountant, Stan Gavitt, with over 30 years experience in government accounting. He will help you with your budget and budget preparation. Documents to ensure that they're compliant. We have a commercialization expert, Suzanne Hamlin, who will help you. She and I will work with you together to develop your commercialization strategy. And we have a market researcher that will send off to do some secondary market research so that you get good data on the market, size of the market, competition, et cetera, that we'll use to populate your proposal narrative. So it's a good program. It's all supported by MTI. And so we work with you directly. You are not required to pay us at all. So that's a good thing. Let's say you're not a good writer and you want to hire a grant writer. You can apply to MTI directly for financial support to hire that grant writer. Keep in mind that any funding that you get from MTI, that you apply to MTI for, has to be matched dollar for dollar. And normally phase awards for grant writers and that sort of support or subject matter experts are limited to $5,000. So you would have to come up roughly with $2,500, or in-kind labor is normally accepted as a good match, and then $2,500 from MTI. All right, so one of the other opportunities, as we talked about earlier, was commercialization support and matching programs. So if you get the first 100,000 of MTI funding is a grant, and most of the federal agencies will accept that as part of their matching funds program. So that's good to know. And whether that's phase 1 or phase 2, we want to try to stretch that $100,000 across both programs. You can apply to MTI for funding to bridge the gap between phase 1 and phase 2 using your phase 1 money as match. And you can also, once you get a phase 2 award, You can again apply for MTI funding to cover those sort of activities that one of these federal agencies doesn't cover, such as patent work, marketing, preparation for VC funding, all of that sort of thing. So you need to consider MTI as a strong partner of your technology development. And here's their core mission. And I want to see, okay, 3 minutes, our core, the core mission of MTI. And please do keep in mind that all of the people, Suzanne, Stan, and myself, are consultants to MTI. And so, you know, we're kind of synonymous, if you will, with MTI, but we do work independently. Here's the history of MTI. Again, mandated and funded by the state of Maine. It's a great program. They have super opportunities. I highly recommend that you go to mainetechnology.org and spend a whole lot of time looking at all of your all of the web pages and understanding where your technology might fit. A few years ago, they instituted a program using viral levels, which talks about across 9 business areas, if you will, where your company would sit. And here's a range that'll give you an idea of what sort of funding that you can get. And so as you go up the viral level, so too don't your opportunities for federal funding. Okay, there's the process. There's the requirements, 7 targeted technology sectors, Maine-based organizations. They again, they fund everything now. MTI funds everything from, you know, new ideas all the way to scale up and manufacturing. So keep that in mind. It's pretty broad. And then we'll just go through that real quick. Again, evaluation criteria looks an awful lot like the SBIR evaluation. And then finally, these are just some little ideas. And I just love that the last one by Albert Einstein that says, if you can't explain it to your grandmother, you know, you don't really understand it, because you've got to be able to elucidate your idea to both technically savvy and business savvy folks. Finally, my liaison at MTI is Shane Beckham. There's his contact information. There's mine. We both are available via phone or email. Email always works great to get started. And Cindy, I think we probably maybe have a minute or so. Did we get all the questions answered? Are there 1 or 2 that?
Yeah, there were 1 or 2. I did put your contact information in the chat. Also, the link to your email, and also said that you'd be happy to talk to people about specific questions. One that came up earlier, though, that you could probably answer, this is what it says. What if your idea is about designing a new piece of equipment that would benefit the efficiencies of your business's production, but that it's not within the scope of your business to actually manufacture the equipment, and then in parentheses, now or in the future for other businesses?
There's a lot of facets to that, and
Yeah.
I would say, why don't you give me a call and let's talk about it. You know, the focus is to get products, processes, and services out into the general public. So even though it's going to benefit you, you kind of have to show how it's going to impact others. Like with USDA, if you're going to develop new aquafeed, okay, and it's going to benefit your fish farm, well, that's good, but you know, they're not just going to fund you to benefit you. There has to always be a social and economic benefit to the nation, because it's federal taxpayer dollars that's funding it. So we had a company that wanted to move into a new field. And so their technology had never been developed. It was a new field, and it was to benefit them by developing this new set of machinery and tools, if you will. But what that was going to do was open up a brand new market to the company, right? So that company then expands the company's business. They get to hire more people. They get more revenue. They pay more tax dollars. So while it benefited the company, there was this huge, societal benefit, if you will, by improving manufacturing of new products. So yeah, that there was a lot to unpack in that statement. So please give me a call and shoot me an email, and then we'll have a chat. At this time, we're just slightly over. Just be aware or be reminded that this webinar was being recorded, and you will get a link to access it for probably about a week, and then it'll come down. But this website presentation will also be posted on MTI's website under the Federal Funding Assistance tab. Other than that, thank you for attending. I hope you found it of value. I would look forward to talking with you and working with you to get your ideas into the marketplace. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Bye-bye.